Hey guys, welcome to dailyfantasycafe.com. I'm here with Jason Gilbo. I'm Rob Mazaika, and this is the target and touches report for NFL Week 2 of the season. Week 1, the total crapshoot. I think you said before the show that 53 players that have 200 something made value. It was just an ugly week, a bunch of ugly games, but hopefully Week 2 things will regulate a little more.
Oh, yeah, it was a disaster of a week. And like you said, I saw that tweet. It was just 53 people hit value. That's just insane out of 200 plus. And this is week where, a ton of high implied totals. We got a lot of games and some shootouts down south. And, we'll definitely break things down as far as targets go.
Yeah, there's going to be some chalky players that we're going to touch on, and also a couple contrarian guys, and some spots we're definitely going to stay away from. But we're going to start out here with the New England Patriots passing game. They're implied to score about 30 points against the New Orleans Saints defense, which is still god awful.
Yeah, they were bad. Torn up by Sam Bradford, Tom Brady coming off of a loss. We kind of know what's going to happen here. Brandon Cooks, we got the revenge game against New Orleans. He saw 7 targets in week 1. I think we see a tick up about 8 or 9 there. I'm actually a big fan of Gronk this week. I think this is going to be a pretty big Gronkowski week. And I saw 6 targets. He was on the field for 96% of the snaps, which obviously at his health, that's what we like to see. So I definitely like kind of those big guys. But, this is once again a team that's loaded with options.
Yeah, and I think they might come a little lower owned, especially with that Sunday night game between the Packers and the Falcons. But a guy who I'm looking towards is Chris Hogan with the Amendola injury. Hogan was in the slot 64% of the time, and the corner he's going to be lining up against is P.J. Williams. And against Adam Thielen, he gave up 4 for 95 to slot receivers. And it's just a spot where if Brady can exploit it, he will just keep targeting the bad corner over and over again. And Hogan could definitely break out for a big game like we saw him do last year.
Yeah, and he was out there. Obviously, Amendola was the one who saw a lot of the snaps, or a lot of the targets. But once that kind of came up, another guy I do have some interest in is James White on DraftKings, given the PPR site. New Orleans is a team that struggles against opposing backs in the passing game and just in the passing game in general. White outsnapped Gillislee 43-24. Saw 5 targets. I can see 6 or 7 in this type of game. At his price tag, he's cheap. I don't mind him as kind of a flex guy in this one, and I just think he's going to be a little bit overlooked because there are some other cheap options.
It's definitely possible. And then another guy who I'm thinking of in a really contrarian sense, just thinking of the way the Patriots work, is Rex Burkhead. He's a guy who I could see coming in and actually filling in a little bit for Amendola in the slot. I remember in the preseason they were using him in the slot a little bit. And at 3,900 on DraftKings, he's not a guy who you go all in on, but if you're multi-entering a tournament, he's a guy I wouldn't mind sprinkling in maybe, I don't know, a couple shares just because that's what the Patriots do. They have these random guys who just get 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, this is a week where, this game in general, there's 7 or 8 viable options in this one, and it's just kind of narrowing down who's going to get it. And like you said, it's always kind of a guessing game with this Patriots team because there's so many options. But, Cooks, Gronkowski, White, Hogan, Burkhead, all viable this week.
Yeah, and then next team we're going to talk about has a lot of options too. The New Orleans Saints on the other side of that game against the Patriots. 24 implied total going up against Bill Belichick and his scheme to keep the ball away from their number 1 target, Michael Thomas. So what's your projection on these target and touches?
I think targets are still going to be there for Thomas. I still think 8 to 9 is viable because, you look at Thomas, saw a lot of Xavier Rhodes last night and still saw 8 targets. He wasn't efficient, but like you said, New England's a team that likes to take away the number 1 weapons for opposing teams. We saw them, narrow down on Travis Kelce, and they made other guys beat them. You look at the Saints team. Not a lot of intriguing options outside of Michael Thomas. Kobe Fleener looked good in that game against Minnesota. Ted Ginn's a wild card threat. But I like the passing backs here. Alvin Kamara, he led the Saints in snaps, saw 6 targets. It's pretty clear what his role in this offense is going to be. Given the fact that the Saints are underdogs, I just can see game flow really dictating Kamara and really Ingram too in terms of targets because they combined for 11 against Minnesota and were trailing most of that game. So they're decent options down low. I don't really want any part of guys like Tommy Lee Lewis, who saw some snaps, Brandon Coleman. Those guys are just kind of bits and pieces there until Willie Snead comes back.
Yeah, I agree there with the Kamara call. The Patriots, they when they're leading the opposing team, normally those dump offs to their running backs, and Kamara is going to be the guy. Well, it looked like Kamara was going to be the guy who was going to get the share of that, getting over 50% of the snaps last week against the Vikings. But a guy who I'm looking towards, like you mentioned, Ted Ginn Jr. against against the Chiefs, the Patriots, Tyreek Hill, he kind of just got behind the defense, and McCourty just got burned a couple of times. And so that's where Ginn's strength really is. He could really get behind the defense and get you one of those long touchdowns in this game that should be a shootout.
Yeah, really. This game that's probably going to be. I mean, between this one and Atlanta and Green Bay, these are the two games that have the best totals on the week.
Yeah, I agree there. And then let's move on to Atlanta Falcons against the Green Bay Packers. This is the marquee game of the night.
Yeah, Sunday night game. We got basically a Sunday night game that is going to dictate a lot of GPPs and cash games just because there's so many options. And we're going to look at the Falcons side. I mean, Green Bay is pretty solidified in terms of who we're going to be looking at. But, coming off the Falcons, we saw Julio Jones just 5 targets in the opener. Mohamed Sanu had 9. Coleman and Freeman both combined for 8. Jones and Sanu, I kind of expect to swap there. Jones is going to be a guy who I expect to be around 9 to 12 targets in this game against the Green Bay secondary that they underperform on the road. They're just a bad defense when they get away from home. Last year, I mean, they nearly allowed double the points that they did at home. So with Matt Ryan, I mean, Jones, I expect them to get back on track. Austin Hooper, obviously one of the bigger guys of the week. He only saw 2 targets. I mean, there was a long 80-yard touchdown pass, with those vicious stiff arms that he had. So I'm not going to be chasing the Hooper week. I'm going to be going some other directions at tight end and let other people go that route because I still think outside of Jones and Sanu, it's more Coleman and Freeman in the passing game than it is Hooper.
Yeah, it really is. Hooper was more of a matchup thing against the Bears. The Bears were really good against the tight ends, and Hooper, like you said, those vicious stiff arms are the reason why he got all of his points. But Julio Jones, I think he's going to come in really popular this week against the Packers in the conference championship. He had 42 fantasy points on FanDuel. He went 9 for 180 and 2 touchdowns. But then again, he faced them last season in the earlier weeks too, and he only went 3 for 29. So that's the range of outcomes you get with Julio. He could either break out a couple of long touchdowns, break a slant like the Odell Beckham does, and just gain all his yards that way, or they can target him in the red zone, which they said they're going to do this year, but I really haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you didn't really see it against Chicago. I mean, they weren't great. That offense really wasn't clicking week 1. I expect things to get going here. And just overall, I mean, game flow is definitely going to eat. They didn't need Jones for Chicago. They need Jones this week.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need Jones this week. They're going to be going back and forth with these Packers in the passing game. This game's going to be a shootout, a Sunday night hammer, but it's going to be high-owned. So it's just something you're going to have to make a decision on if you want to really ride the chalk in this game or try to find some contrarian options. Yep. But next we're going to move on to a team that we're going to potentially stay away from, and that's the Seattle Seahawks running game between CJ Prosise, Eddie Lacy, Chris Carson, and Thomas Rawls, who's coming back from injury.
Yeah, this was one. I mean, going on the road, they didn't really do well, and Seattle's a team that does struggle away from home. But this offensive line, I mean, it's still bad. This is a good game flow game. San Francisco, I think, will improve a little bit this year, but overall, I mean, I'm not really on board with anyone. You and I were talking before the show. I mean, Chris Carson was their best bet in that Green Bay game. I mean, Eddie Lacy saw a couple of touches, and they realized basically this guy has nothing left, and he sat on the bench. CJ Prosise will get a couple of touches, but more so in the passing game. I just think, if we see Rawls come back and be 100% and he's going to get 15-plus touches, sure, I'll take a look at him. If it's going to be pretty split between him and Carson, I just think the upside's capped. And there's plenty of other running backs to go within these price ranges to go with this week. So even though the matchup's juicy, I'm not going to be probably going that route.
Yeah, it's a tough spot because the Seahawks last week against the Packers, they barely ran any plays. That game was just a really ugly game to watch on the offensive side of things. If Thomas Rawls was out this week, I doubt he's going to be out, but I would really like Chris Carson just because he had over 50% of the snaps, and against the 49ers, who just gave it up to Jonathan Stewart and not really McCaffrey, but he tried. It's just it would have been a good spot, but since Rawls is back, I just have no interest in this running game at all.
Yeah, if we got points for trying, then we'd be on with these guys.
Yeah, exactly. McCaffrey tried, but it didn't get anywhere. But let's get on to another team, the Baltimore Ravens running game, who we're actually looking towards one of these guys here. Since Danny Woodhead went down for an injury, it looks like he's going to be out maybe 3 to 4 weeks with that. I don't even know what it was, something with his leg. But you got Buck Allen and Terrence West who are going to be splitting the share here. What's your take on that?
It's going to be probably all about Buck Allen this week. You looked at that game last. I mean, Terrence West 19 touches, Buck Allen 21 touches. Buck Allen did outsnap Terrence West by 6, playing over 50%, and that was after Woodhead left. Buck Allen's the one guy that I'm looking at. I'm projecting over 20 touches for him. I still think West will have about 15, 13, around that range, just because this is probably going to be another game where Baltimore just has that game flow. And they've made it a clear focus that they're going to run the ball because this passing game isn't great. This Cleveland defense, obviously, they shut down Bell, and we're just kind of zoning in on him. I don't think that's really going to be the case again with them heading on the road. So if we see Baltimore have really 40-plus attempts on the game, I mean, both Allen and West are going to be very playable, but I would definitely lean towards Buck Allen. I think you can still play West to be contrarian.
Yeah, I do like Buck Allen this game. I was watching this Browns-Steelers game last week, and the Browns defense actually looked pretty good against the run. It wasn't that bad. But then again, it's only a one-game sample, and the Steelers' offense didn't really look like they had everything clicking. But Buck Allen at 4,100 on DraftKings in a full PPR format, I really have a ton of interest in him because I think he's going to be slotting into a lot of those targets that Danny Woodhead would have gotten if he was healthy. And Terrence West is more of a traditional runner, so I think Buck Allen, he's a good play at that cheap price on DraftKings.
Yep.
And now we're going to move on to another injury situation here with the Arizona Cardinals running game. David Johnson, he had the unfortunate wrist injury. He looks like he's going to be out at least maybe 12 weeks. It's going to be a long-term thing. We got Kerwin Williams, Andre Ellington, and they just signed CJ 2K back to the team. So let's hear your take on this backfield here.
It's not good. This Cardinals team is not good. I mean, for one, they're a bad offense. And their offensive line average at best. I mean, this is more kind of a situation where Indy is going to put a lot of teams in play, even if you are average, just because of that's how bad they are.
Look at Gurley.
Yeah, I mean, Gurley didn't even look that great. He got his, but I mean, efficiency wise, he just wasn't good. Kerwin Williams, I mean, he's going to be a guy who, first and second down, get some goal line reps. I think 14, 15 touches is good. If the game flow goes well, I mean, you can see that creeping up into 18, 19, 20. Ellington, he got a lot of the work in that game against the Lions, but that was because they were down a lot. Ellington's just been a guy who's been injured for most of his career. He's a passing down back. I don't think that Ellington's going to outsnap Williams again. So for me, Williams you can look at this week. He's not my favorite cheap one, but I think if you're kind of paying up for some of those expensive options in the passing games that we talked about before, you can give him a look. This is a good matchup against Indy. Once again, they struggle against the run. Johnson leaves a lot of touches up in the air, and I would not be surprised to see if some of those guys maybe in the passing game to see the short passing game kind of get in a little bit more involved with, Jermaine Gresham and hitting Fitz more and kind of relying on those guys too. So I'm not completely funneling all my attention to Kerwin Williams, but he is on my radar.
He's on my radar too, not for FanDuel. He's too expensive at 6,100, Kerwin Williams, but he's 4,800 on DraftKings. It's a spot. I mean, he's not going to – I don't know how many targets he's going to actually get, but he's going to get the carries, and he's only 4,800 on DraftKings, so it's a spot where you could look towards. They might even try to sprinkle in some end-arounds with John Brown and his speed they have there. But it's pretty much just a spot that I'm going to stay away from. And with Chris Johnson, I doubt he's going to start this week, but in the coming weeks, he's just going to take away carries from this guy. And it's just going to be a three-man committee, and I'm just not going to be looking towards it at all for the time being at least.
No, I completely agree. Once Johnson comes in, there's no appeal for me.
No, and definitely not in FanDuel. You can't go there. But that's going to wrap it up for us today. Be on the lookout for this NFL Target and Touches Report Week 2 article on dailyfantasycafe.com. Go on there, check out all of our content, and keep watching our videos and boosting our ratings here. We got to keep it going for this season.
Yep. Good luck, guys.
Good luck.